Okay, guys, while we're going through the current crisis of COVID-19, a lot of people are looking at being more prepared. And so because of that, I just decided it was really good to come in and just do a basic video on how to get started being prepared. Now, one of the first things I want to say is that, guys, while this seems a little bit overwhelming right now, it will pass. What it does to our nation, we don't know at this point. But we do know that sooner or later, things are going to get right back to normal. And so I really encourage you to make a plan now to get yourself prepared for whatever comes down the road. I heard this recently that, people have considered preppers to be kind of crazy. And now everybody wants to be a prepper. And I'll tell you what, guys, it just makes sense. And one of the things about our channel is we call it Sensible Prepper for a reason. When I first started this channel, a lot of people were nervous about things. They didn't know where to turn. They wanted some information on how to get started, because guys, it can be overwhelming. It's to do a little bit constantly over time, and before long you'll realize that you have a nice stockpile. One of the big things about this is that it gives you peace of mind. Now, I base all of my preps, whether it's bunkering in, and that means staying at the house and having the supplies I need, or in a bug out situation where I need to evacuate. And now when I say bug out, guys, a lot of people feel like if they have a bag full of supplies that they're prepared. But if you have to bug out, it should be the last resort. You are a glorified refugee if you are bugging out. And having a place to go, though, is number one. But if you're planning to do a bug out bag, make sure that you have all the supplies you need, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to be doing a video coming up on putting together your bug out bag. I've done this in the past, but I'm getting ready to redo my bug out system. But what we're going to talk mainly about today is bunkering in. And that means you're at your house, you have all the supplies you need for an extended period of time to where you don't even need to leave the house. So all of my plans are based on the rule of threes. And that means that you have 3 seconds without hope. And so number one, having a plan. Guys, if you have just hope with no plan, it's just a dream. And so you need to put together a plan. So then we have 3 minutes. 3 minutes without air. Now, without air means that you may have smoke, you may have dust, like at 9/11. I mean, there was dust everywhere from those buildings falling down. And so you need to first be able to protect your face, or in any kind of pandemic or some kind of sickness going around. Protect your face. Whether it's the N95 mask, whether it's just a bandana around to filter out, or all the way up to a gas mask. And there are a number of different things that are in between. But having some kind of way to protect your breathing. Guys, 3 minutes without air, and you're going to start really having some serious trouble. Then you have 3 hours. 3 hours in harsh conditions. And that means you need to be ready for the weather, whether it's extreme cold or extreme hot. Your body loses your fluids, you start to go into dehydration, and you can have a sunstroke. I mean, you have got to be able to take care of yourself in harsh conditions. If you have no way to heat your house, if the power goes out, you need to start thinking about how am I going to do that? Do I do it through a wood stove? Do I do it through a kerosene heater? Do I use gas and propane? Of course, gas and propane run out after a while. But having some things together to be able to keep your family warm. Now, let's say you don't have anything, having extra blankets around, especially in cold conditions, because really we're more susceptible to extreme cold than we are extreme heat. If you have sleeping bags that you can get into, that is a great way to be able to protect yourself. It's very basic. Now you have 3 days without water. Guys, water is essential to life. We're made up of 80% water. And we need to be able to hydrate ourselves. We need to be able to stay, where we can drink water, have good, potable, fresh water. If you're looking at a creek that you have somewhere local, or a river or a canal, guys, typically that water is full of cryptosporidium and different bacteria, and you definitely don't need to drink it. What happens is, if you do drink it, you can get really sick if you don't die, and you're not going to be able to take care of things in an emergency situation. So you need to be able to filter water. Now, there's a lot of different water filters out there. A lot of them are portable, and those are great. Whether it's the Katadyn Hiker Pro or Frontier filters. I mean, there's a ton of different ones. Aquamira makes a number of them. I keep some in my bag. But for everyday use, you need something a little larger. What we have been using for a number of years is the Big Berkey system. And the standard Big Berkey will filter out 6,000 gallons of water. Guys, we have a pool. That is one of our preps. We can actually use that water, run it to the Big Berkey, and we'll have good, fresh drinking water. We have a stream on our property. There's a river not even a mile from here if we needed to get water, and we can use that through our Big Berkey. Yes, you can store up water bottles, gallon water, and that's a great thing to have. But for long-term survival, having a way to filter water is really your best bet. Of course, 3 weeks without food. And guys, you can live 3 weeks without food. And a lot of people put that as their priority. But you can really go a lot longer. Of course, one thing about food is you can go with long-term preps. We have a lot of dry goods, things that are dehydrated, or things that are in number 10 cans. A few years ago, we went down to the Mormon cannery and we loaded up with a lot of dry goods, and that will really last us for at least a year. And guys, I'm not telling you that's what you need to do. That is, if you're just wanting basic preps and to get started with something like we're dealing with now, I would highly suggest getting just the foods you eat, but you're going to have to get a lot of non-perishables. So different canned foods, things like that. But one of the big things is to rotate them out. And there's a lot of systems actually where you load them from the back and you pull them from the front. But having a pantry that is full and that is deep, and make sure that you have plenty of food for an extended period of time. I highly recommend anyone to have at least 3 months worth of food on hand at any time. But we don't necessarily want to get into our dry goods unless the situation gets really critical. But also you can store up MREs, you can store up like Mountain House foods, dehydrated foods, Backpacker's Pantry. I mean, there's a lot of different foods like that. And those are excellent. They're very quick, easy to make. You can just open them up, add a little water. Of course, with the MREs, you don't even have to add water. And you can eat and have meals. The only problem, especially with the MREs, is they do have a shorter shelf life than a lot of things like Mountain House and different dehydrated foods. Another thing you can do is lifeboat food. Lifeboat food has about a 5-year shelf life. They just come in these nice blocks, and they're actually very tasty, and they'll keep you from getting dehydrated. You don't need as much liquid. They don't take out as much of your hydration, and so they're made actually, again, for a lifeboat. So there's a number of different choices out there, and there's a number of different food packs. One thing you want to definitely do is try them before you use them, because sometimes they're full of salt, they've been processed, and they're just really not that good for you. So do your research. Some of the more premium brands that are out there, are definitely recommended. Now also, when it comes to food, you can look at dehydrated milk, you can look at condensed milk. Of course, bread is going to be a very difficult thing. Learning how to make bread, but having the materials and the stuff you need on hand. But when you're in an emergency situation, you don't necessarily want to be trying to put together, complicated meals, things that you need a lot of things for. And two, when you're putting together your meal plan, guys, sometimes you just can't put those meals like you would like to. And you just have to use whatever you have available. Different kind of soups are also great to have. But the dried mix. And so there's a lot of dried type foods that you can have that you can keep on hand. Of course, ramen noodles are a huge staple, especially for college kids, but for any of us when you go through hard times. But one thing that you want to expand from that is possibly gardening. Here's the thing, guys. If you've never gardened before, you don't need to wait and just grab some seeds and then if something happens to start planting gardens. It's really great to go ahead and get into doing some gardening, even if it's on a small scale, and to build up, because you learn so much as you're doing your vegetables, as you're harvesting them. What do I need to do with them? Also, if it's possible, having chickens. Chickens are great. You can use them for meat, but the eggs are awesome, and they last for a long time. If you don't wash your eggs, they will last and last, and there's some other ways to preserve them. Also, rabbits, and that's one that we have never done, but we are getting ready, hopefully, to do that in the next few months, or probably next year by this time. But having some livestock around, and of course you can expand on beyond that. And really with food, one of the things about that is you can reach out to your neighbors, especially if you live in an area that has more agricultural areas, and you can use those as resources, like to share a beef or, do things like that, or with eggs, and be able to barter and trade. So food is something that everyone needs, and it's one of those things that if you're very creative, you can do a lot with. But you've got to have your plan before the grocery shelves completely run dry. Now guys, if you have pets, you definitely want to make sure that you have some food put back for them. A lot of times they can eat some of the table scraps and things like that, but cat food and dog food is cheap, or fish food and canary food. But having food put back for your animals is just responsible, and you need to be able to take care of them. Now there are two areas that flow in between these. They could happen from 1 second all the way up to 3 years, and that would be your medical, number one. Having a good medical kit, making sure you have some extra prescription drugs, get an extended prescription to have those meds on hand. But also just basic medications, whether it's Advil, Imodium, whatever. Benadryl, those kind of things that you have a supply of. Not just enough to get you by. Not just enough to where the bottle is this low and then all of a sudden you need to run to the store. You need to have some supplies of these put back. Band-Aids, then you go into bandages, you go into splints, and then we move on up to trauma kits, where if somebody was to injure themselves in a life-threatening situation, you would be able to take care of it and hopefully get them to some kind of medical care. If you can't get them to medical care, guys, you are your first responder. You have to take care of them. But guys, having the medical supplies ahead of time is just essential. And there's a lot of different kits out there. I know Skinny Medic at Medical Gear Outfitters, and I'll have a link down below. Those guys are awesome. USN ER Doc, and that's at amp3.net, and I'll have a link down below as well. And there are others out there, but definitely get your medical system put together, not only for your trauma, but also for your regular meds that you need for whatever reason. Now, hygiene is really important in a survival situation. Make sure you have cleaning supplies. Make sure that you have your personal hygiene items, whether it's toothpaste, soap, shampoo, those kind of things to keep you clean. And you don't want to be susceptible to germs and other things that can make you sick, and it'll keep disease down. As we've seen with this COVID-19 thing, man, cleanliness is next to godliness, and you need to make sure that you keep your areas clean and you have good personal hygiene. And that is important in all the different survival situations. And of course, don't forget your toilet paper. Having a good supply of toilet paper is very comforting, especially in today's world when there is no toilet paper. Security is definitely something that falls outside of the rule of threes. And having some kind of way to protect what you have, protect your family, protect the food and the stock that you have set aside. That's a very important element. And unfortunately, in today's world, we have to worry about that. One of the things about food is if the people don't have food, they get very angry and they get desperate, and they'll do desperate things. And so having some kind of way to protect yourself, obviously the best is a firearm. And having some kind of firearm, handy to be able to give yourself protection if you need to leave, having something portable. And guys, you have to check your laws, local and state laws and things like that. But definitely a firearm is a huge part of security. Now there are 3 different type firearms that you need to consider. Number 1, a handgun, because it's portable, it's easy to carry, it's easy to hide. And so it's one thing that you can have somewhat of a self-protection with just a revolver or a semi-automatic pistol. The second thing would be a shotgun, and that's one of the best for home defense. Having a good shotgun, guys, you can really do a lot with it. It's very lethal, especially if you live in a highly populated area. Having a shotgun will keep from, a bullet going through 2 or 3 houses, because those things will go through walls. But of course, last and not least is a rifle of some sort. The AR-15 has become extremely popular. It's one of the most popular selling rifles in America for good reason. And if you're facing multiple attackers, having an AR-15 with extra magazines is very effective, and it does give you a level of comfort. And so while handguns are great, they're small and compact, shotguns are great for home defense up close. A rifle will give you extended distance. You can actually use it for hunting, and it definitely will be a great stop for multiple attackers. And of course, there are other things that you can use. A good knife, even a bat or something, to be able to ward off people. A pepper spray, stun guns. I mean, the list goes on. But here's the thing, guys. If it gets really desperate, there's nothing that substitutes having a firearm. Now, the second part of security would be your lighting. Having some good flashlights, being able to illuminate the dark. Guys, light is your number one security tool. So having good flashlights is important, whether it's personal or larger lights, search and rescue type lights. Also lighting around your house, whether it's motion detectors, things like that. Guys, you need light. One of the things about an SHTF situation is we don't know. Like right now, we have power water. Our motion detector lights are working, everything's great. So, that's one thing, that having that extra lighting, and then your batteries for your flashlights. Make sure you have extra batteries. Perimeter alarms are very important in our situation. We have a driveway alarm. We have other alarms around that if anybody's messing around the house, we're notified ahead of time. In fact, I've done a number of reviews on some very simple perimeter alarms that you can set up in an emergency situation. Comms are important. Communication is vital. And we rely on our cell phone, and it can do so much. But if towers are down, if cell service is cut off, you need to have alternate methods. One big thing that I would highly recommend right up front is an emergency radio. It's a weather radio. This one has solar and it has hand crank, so it has rechargeable batteries. But you can put standard batteries. It has shortwave. It does the weather and also a lot of other stations. And so we have a couple of those that we use. And there's a lot of those out on the market. Little two-way radios, you can get them rechargeable with little base stations. Those are important as well. Here we have a couple of others. And then we have our ham radios, and this is really the most vital part. Ham radios are going to do a lot more than any other type radio, especially if you have repeaters that are still working. You can reach all over the world, and of course you can go crazy with ham. There's a lot of ham operators, with their Radio Shacks and all their different equipment. And it's one thing that we're slowly getting into, but that's one thing about it is communications are vital. You need to know what's going on around you. So don't just rely on the cell phone. Guys, another thing is tools. Having your basic tool set, having a good axe, shovel, hammers, screwdrivers, your basics, but your yard implements are definitely very useful. Having a good axe, possibly a chainsaw. Things that you might need. In a emergency, you could even have like tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes. And so having a way to be able to cut down trees that have fallen on your house, do things like that, having a lot of tools set aside. In fact, I did a video about having tools for SHTF. And so make sure you have your tools and you have them together in one place. They're nice and maintained. You can sharpen your axe.